Welcome to Life Stories. Today, we bring you a powerful tale of betrayal, deception, and self-discovery. The protagonist, a successful woman in love, finds herself caught in a web of lies spun by her husband and his wealthy family. What starts as a fairy tale marriage quickly unravels as secrets are exposed and trust is shattered. Join us as we dive into a journey of resilience and empowerment, where one woman learns to stand up for herself and reclaim her life. Be sure to subscribe to our channel to start today's story. It was a cool autumn evening when everything began to unravel. I had just married Jake, the love of my life. Or so I thought. We had spent months planning our wedding, blending our lives together in what felt like an inseparable union. He was everything I could have wanted in a partner: charming, successful, and driven, or at least, that's what I had believed. The night we arrived at his parents' estate for a family dinner, something in the air felt off. But I couldn't quite put my finger on it. The estate was breathtaking, tucked away on the outskirts of Connecticut. A sprawling mansion with high stone walls and ivy-covered facades. Inside, the warmth of the fire crackled in the hearth, and the table was set with fine china and gleaming silver. The atmosphere was picture-perfect, a reflection of the world Jake had grown up in. Dinner was a quiet affair. The conversation flowed, and Jake's parents, Robert and Linda, made every effort to welcome me into their family, though their attempts felt superficial, almost forced. I tried to push the unsettling feeling aside, thinking I was simply being paranoid. But as the evening went on, I could sense that something more was at play. As we finished our meal, Robert and Linda stood up from the table. "We have something to discuss with you, dear," Robert said, his voice polite but firm. I followed them into the study, a large room lined with bookshelves filled with leather-bound volumes, the scent of aged paper filling the air. Jake followed us in, his usual easygoing demeanor gone, replaced by an air of discomfort that I hadn't seen before. "Please, sit." Linda motioned to the leather chairs in front of the desk. I settled into one, but something in the way Robert and Linda exchanged glances made my heart race. "We want to make sure that our family's future is secure," Robert began, his voice measured, almost rehearsed. "We've worked hard to build a legacy, and we want to make sure it's preserved." Linda continued, her smile tight. "As part of Jake's inheritance, we need you to sign a few documents." At that moment, my instincts flared. Something wasn't right. I turned to Jake, looking for reassurance, but he avoided my gaze. He didn't seem surprised. I took the papers they handed me, my fingers brushing against the fine linen paper, the weight of it feeling heavier than I expected. "What are these?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "They're just some formalities," Linda replied quickly, her smile never quite reaching her eyes. "It's just a matter of making sure that everything is in place." I scanned the contract. At first glance, it seemed harmless, just a set of legal terms, standard, I assumed, for the family's trust and inheritance. But as I read deeper, something about the wording began to make me uncomfortable. "This contract," I said slowly, "it gives full control of our assets to the family trust. It's as if you're asking me to sign over everything we've worked for." Jake shifted uncomfortably beside me, but said nothing. "That's correct," Robert replied. "It's for the benefit of the family. It ensures that the wealth we've built will stay within the family and be passed down to future generations." I felt my heart race. "Jake, is this what you've been planning?" I turned to him, finally confronting the man I thought I knew. He avoided my gaze, and in that moment, I knew this wasn't just a formality, it was a scheme. "Jake, you should have told me about this," I whispered, a sense of betrayal sinking deep into my chest. "Why didn't you tell me?" Before he could answer, there was a knock at the door. "Who's that?" I asked, my voice trembling now. At that moment, the door opened, and a woman stepped in. Rachel, my lawyer, the one person I had trusted implicitly. She had always advised me to protect my interests, and I had kept her on retainer for just such a moment. "I think it's time for a second opinion," Rachel said calmly, taking her place by my side. She scanned the contract, her eyes narrowing as she read. "This contract is far more than a formality," she said, her voice crisp and authoritative. "It's a way for the family to take control of your finances. This isn't just about trust, it's a manipulation of power. One that you should never agree to." I looked back at Jake, his face pale, and in that moment, I realized the depth of the deception. My world, the one I thought was built on love and trust, was a lie. My husband had brought me into a family that sought to control me, just as they had controlled him. I felt the anger rise within me, a surge of adrenaline coursing through my veins. This wasn't about a contract or a family legacy. It was about power, about control, and about the man I had married. "Jake," I said softly, "this isn't who I am. This isn't the life I signed up for." As the weight of the situation settled in, I realized that the path I had been walking wasn't the one I had imagined. It wasn't about love, it was about survival. And I wasn't going to let anyone take away what was mine. The days that followed the confrontation at his parents' estate felt like a whirlwind. I couldn't escape the feeling that everything I had believed about Jake, about us, was a lie. He was the man I had married, the one I thought I knew inside and out. But now, as the pieces of the puzzle fell into place, I began to see a different picture, one that was dark and full of manipulation. Jake's avoidance of my questions in the study that night was only the beginning. After Rachel, my lawyer, intervened, I thought I'd have the answers I needed. But Jake was elusive, and the silence between us grew deeper with each passing day. I began to dig into the past, the little things that didn't add up, the details I had dismissed as nothing more than quirks of his personality. What I found shook me to the core. The first clue came when I reviewed our finances. We had always kept separate accounts, but Jake had access to mine. As I trusted him, I began to notice unexplained withdrawals and loans that had been taken out in my name. Loans I had no knowledge of. The amounts were staggering. At first, I thought it was a mistake. Maybe something misfiled or an administrative error. But as I examined the bank statements, I realized there was a pattern. A pattern that pointed directly to Jake. I confronted him about it one evening, asking him why I hadn't been informed about these loans. "What is this, Jake?" I demanded, my voice shaky but firm. "Why didn't you tell me about this?" He stammered, his face flushed. "It's nothing, really. I needed some extra funds for business. But everything's fine. Don't worry about it." His words were smooth, but they didn't hold weight. The more I pressed, the more he backpedaled. The half-truths started to unravel, revealing the truth I had feared. Jake had been sinking us deeper into debt, hiding it from me, and using my name as collateral. It wasn't just about money, it was about control. And it was about Jake's greed. But that wasn't all. As I continued to dig, a pattern of dishonesty emerged. I hired a private investigator to look into Jake's past, suspecting that the man I had married wasn't the person I had imagined. The investigator uncovered even more lies, financial misdeeds, shady business dealings, and a history of dishonesty that Jake had kept hidden from me. It didn't stop there. I found out that Jake had been in a previous relationship, one that he had kept from me entirely. He had promised his ex-fiancée, Sarah, that they would marry one day. Despite knowing that he was already planning his future with me, I felt sick to my stomach. My trust in him had been shattered beyond repair. The final blow came when I discovered the true reason behind Jake's actions. He wasn't simply trying to protect his family's wealth. He had been plotting to gain control of mine as well. The inheritance from a property in Rhode Island, a small estate Jake had told me was insignificant, was, in reality, a gold mine. Jake had intended to leverage our marriage to gain access to this estate. And he had planned to keep me in the dark about its value. The revelation stung more than anything else. It wasn't just the money, it was the fact that he had used our love as a tool for his own gain. I was devastated, betrayed not just by him, but by the realization that the life I thought I was building had been nothing more than an illusion. That night, I sat in our bedroom, the weight of the situation pressing down on me. I had been married to a man I didn't truly know, a man whose motives had been clouded by his ambition and deceit. The anger I felt was suffocating. But beneath it was a deep, unshakable sorrow. How had I missed the signs? How had I let myself fall so deeply in love with someone who had never truly loved me? I was done pretending. The life we had built together, the future I had dreamed of, was over, and as I stared at the evidence before me, I knew there was no turning back. I had to protect myself, and my future. But more importantly, I had to protect my dignity and the life I had once believed in. The path ahead was uncertain. But one thing was clear. Jake's lies had left me no choice but to take action. And I would. The days following my discovery were filled with a strange mix of determination and dread. I had always prided myself on my ability to stay calm under pressure. But now, facing the full extent of Jake's betrayal, I felt a cold fury building within me. He had lied to me, manipulated me, and used our marriage to further his own agenda. And now, it was time for the truth to come out. With the evidence in hand, I knew I couldn't let him get away with it. The trust I had placed in him had been broken beyond repair. And I couldn't simply walk away without ensuring that he would face the consequences of his actions. My lawyer, Rachel, and I worked tirelessly to prepare for the showdown that was inevitably coming. We carefully gathered all the documents, the financial records, and the proof of Jake's past lies and deceptions. The private investigator's report, with its damning details, was ready to be used. The time had come for the final confrontation. I knew it wouldn't be easy. But I also knew it was necessary. I had to stand up for myself, for the woman I had been and for the woman I was becoming. I couldn't allow Jake's lies to define me any longer. The setting for the confrontation was a family dinner, one that Jake had invited me to attend under the guise of reconciliation. He had promised that we would talk things through, that we could find a way to move forward. But I knew better now. This wasn't about reconciliation, it was about exposing him for who he truly was. The dinner took place at Jake's parents' estate, the very place where everything had started to unravel. As we arrived, I couldn't help but feel the weight of the history that hung in the air. The mansion that once felt so welcoming now seemed cold and distant. Robert and Linda were already seated at the table, their expressions neutral, as if they had no idea what was about to unfold. Jake, sitting next to me, looked uneasy. He could feel the tension in the room, though he didn't know how much I had uncovered. For a moment, I considered letting the moment pass, keeping the peace for the sake of family. But then I remembered what he had done to me, how he had deceived me, and the anger flared again. I think it's time we have a real conversation, I said, my voice calm but firm. Everyone at the table fell silent. Jake looked at me, his face pale. What are you talking about? He asked, trying to play it off. You've lied to me for far too long, Jake, I continued, and it's time the truth came out. I turned to Robert and Linda, who were now looking at me with a mix of confusion and curiosity. I know about the loans, the debts you've taken out in my name, and the lies you've told to cover it all up. Jake's eyes widened, and for the first time, I saw real fear in his gaze. I also know about your past, I went on, about the engagement you had before me, the promises you made to her, the promises you never kept. The silence in the room was deafening. Robert and Linda exchanged looks, clearly shocked. But Jake was no longer the calm, collected man I had once known. He was a man exposed, desperate to keep his secrets buried. But the worst part, I said, is that I now know you were planning to use me to gain control of my inheritance. You knew about the estate in Rhode Island, didn't you? You were hoping to leverage our marriage to claim it as your own. Jake's face drained of color as I laid everything bare. He was caught, completely and utterly. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. At that moment, the door opened, and Rachel, my lawyer, stepped in. She had been waiting outside, ready to step in if needed. I think Jake should hear what we have to say next, she said, her tone cold and professional. Rachel laid out the evidence, everything we had gathered. The contracts, the financial records, the private investigator's findings, and placed it all on the table for everyone to see. There was no denying the truth now. Jake's web of lies had been unraveled. The final blow came when Rachel handed Jake a letter from his former fiancée, Sarah, the woman he had promised to marry before me. In it, she detailed their relationship, their engagement, and Jake's promise to her that he would return to her once I had been out of the picture. It was clear now that Jake had never truly committed to me. I had just been a means to an end. As Jake tried to defend himself, his words falling flat, I knew this was the end. His parents, once so protective of him, now looked at him with disappointment. And I, for the first time in a long time, felt a sense of peace. The truth had been exposed, and justice had been served. Jake was arrested that night, charged with financial fraud, bigamy, and manipulation. His family's estate, built on a foundation of lies and greed, was left in ruins. As I stood there, watching it all unravel, I realized that this wasn't just about revenge, it was about reclaiming my life, my future, and my sense of self. The house may have fallen, but I had stood tall. And in the end, that was all that mattered. In the aftermath of the showdown, I found myself standing at a crossroads. The battle for my future had been fought and won, but it had come at a cost. Jake's betrayal had torn apart everything I once believed in, but it had also forced me to rebuild, stronger, wiser, and more independent than I had ever been before. As the legal process unfolded and Jake faced the consequences of his actions, I took the time to focus on myself. The path ahead was no longer clouded by lies and deceit. I had learned to trust in my own strength, to believe in the power of standing up for what was right. No matter the cost, the pain of betrayal would always linger, but I had found peace in knowing that I had taken control of my own destiny. Life had a way of teaching us lessons in the most unexpected ways. Sometimes, it takes losing everything to realize what truly matters: self-worth, integrity, and the courage to walk away from toxic relationships. As I moved forward, I carried with me the lessons I had learned, not just about betrayal, but about resilience and the importance of self-respect. I knew that I could face whatever challenges lay ahead with the same courage and determination that had gotten me through this ordeal. Thank you for watching. Be sure to subscribe to our channel to follow more life stories, where we share real-life experiences, lessons learned, and the strength that comes from overcoming adversity.